Regrettably, I'm about to cause trouble. Written and narrated by Amie McNee. Chapter 13. The carriage crunched to a stop outside of the manor. It was large and dark. Even a child could have told you it was inhabited by the devil. "Everyone out!" yelled Zita from out the front. Hildy and the dog jumped down excitedly. I remained where I was. Rufus's head appeared in my window. "Don't open the door, Rufus." I shook my head vigorously. Jimmy poked his head out of my cloak. Perhaps he was aware that the carriage had stopped, or perhaps he was aware of a ghostly presence. Upon seeing the house, he retreated. I wished I was in someone's pocket. Another man's face appeared at the window behind me. I jumped and let out a small squeal. "Are you a witch?" "Good God!" I clutched my chest. "Are you sent by court? You are here to rid my house of its devils?" "Lord Sotheby?" I asked, my breath irregular from fright. "Verily," he said curtly. He looked haggard, but important. I resigned myself to the job at hand. "Aye, we are here to help you." I got out of the carriage. "The witches are over there." I pointed to the big grand entrance doors, but they had already gone inside. They must have entered. Lord protect them. "Come, we will find them together," I said reluctantly, giving Rufus a meaningful stare. "Don't leave my side," I hissed at him. He nodded. Lord Sotheby gave each of us a wide berth, but followed us as we approached the devil's home on earth. "I will not cross the threshold," its owner muttered. "Hildy!" I yelled into the entrance hall, my voice ringing around the room. Rufus had apparently taken a short break from fearing the devil in order to laugh at me. "Why would you call for Hildy?" he asked, trying to wipe the smile off his face. I glared at him. "Zita!" I corrected myself. "Be careful," the Lord hissed. "You might call the spirit." Goosebumps erupted up my arms. The dog began to bark. The Lord, ghostly white himself, fell onto his knees and shielded his head with his arms. "Save me, witch!" I stared at him, then looked to Rufus, who shrugged unhelpfully. I picked the Lord up by the arm. "Do not fear, my lord. It is our animal. We brought her here to defeat the demon." He was shaking. "I am going to take you inside, but you will be protected under this fairy's protection." I gestured to Rufus, who straightened up and changed his expression to look serious about his ethereal business. We guided the Lord inside. He was muttering prayers, and I prayed that his prayers would protect us. "Zita!" I barked, angry now. "What the fuck did they expect us to do here? We had no actual power, right?" I checked on Jimmy. He was content. Maybe he didn't care about demons or ghosts. I wish I didn't. The spade bitch came tearing down the stairs, nose-diving into the floor. "There you are, Lord Sotheby." Zita was holding a smoking bundle of leaves. Hildy was behind her, holding a candle. I signed angrily at both of them. "Where have you been?" I made sure the gestures were sharp and angry, screaming signs. "We had to do a patrol of the perimeter. I'm glad to see you are under the protection of the Fae, my lord. He is handy in these precarious situations." Rufus inclined his head in a comical manner. Sotheby was still shaking violently. "Have you caught her?" he whimpered. "You feel it is a female presence?" Zita asked. He didn't reply. Come, Lord Sotheby." Hildy tried to detach the Lord from my arm. It was no easy task. "This will be over with soon. We just need you to show us where you are feeling the presence most strongly." His gaze went up the stairs. It appeared we were in the company of a deaf witch and now a mute lord. In the silence, my fears returned. The Lord seemed slow-witted. It had dulled my demon fears for a quick moment, but as we trounced around this big, empty house, I couldn't help but feel something too, something stirring, like the house was taking quick, intermittent breaths, hoping not to be heard. He led us to a drawing room. It was dark. "Sit down, my lord." Hildy and Zita stood above him as he backed himself onto an engraved wooden chair. He was glancing towards the empty fireplace. "What can you see?" Zita asked. "You mean you cannot see them? The room is full of spirits." Zita translated to Hildy, and he stared at the gestures alarmingly. "They're in every nook and cranny, in the ceilings, in the walls, 1,000 more. Terrible black devils with fearful faces. They mutter and terrify me. They go on and on, visiting me from purgatory." Shamefully, I felt myself well up with tears. I couldn't see the faces, but Hildy's fucking candle kept flickering shadows onto the walls. Were they shadows? I got my sleepy cat out from my pocket and put my nose into his fur. The smell calmed me. "My lord," Zita began, "it is not possible for someone to be visiting you from purgatory." "Isn't it?" He sounded almost hopeful. "Certainly not. Purgatory is a Catholic place." "Are you Catholic, my lord?" Hildy pressed. Both witches were bent over this poor man. "God believe me, no. I am loyal to the king, the true head of the church." I wondered briefly whether this wasn't an exorcism at all, but an inquisition for the royal court. Two birds, one stone, I supposed. "If you are speaking true, my lord, we do not have a visiting soul from purgatory problem." "Well, could it be a ghost from hell?" he asked, this only seeming to upset him further. "Have you tried to get in touch with someone who has died, my lord?" "No," he said loudly. A single tear slid down his cheek. "It is very improper to get in touch with the dead, my lord," Zita explained. "But if it is a spirit, from heaven or hell, we needn't worry too much." Hildy relit a bundle of herbs with her flint. "Commonly, such spirits be friends, and if you have invited them into your home, I expect you may ask them to leave." The dog began barking. "God save me," I yelped, unable to stop myself. Instinctively, I turned into Rufus, sandwiching my poor cat between our torsos. He placed a hand on my back soothingly, but I could hear his heart was beating just as fast as mine. "'Tis just a mouse," declared Zita, as the dog ran out the room chasing the small ghost rodent. Jimmy began to stir against us both, as though he knew the word mouse. We were unable to contain him. He wiggled free from our bodies and soundlessly ran out the door. "Jimmy!" Rufus grabbed my hand, willing me not to chase the cat out into a world of ghosts, but I wouldn't let poor Jimmy be the victim of devil work, and I followed the animals. "Jimmy!" I hissed. I could hear the dog barking out the back of the house. I flung myself around dark corridors and down servants' stairs, following the sound of the ghost-hunting bitch. The noise stopped. I stopped. It was dark. I couldn't remember what turns I had made. I was at the top of a new corridor, having taken 2 staircases down. Kitchens would be somewhere. Perhaps that's where the mouse lived, with the scraps and the crumbs. I swallowed, but my mouth was dry. There was a flickering light coming from a room at the end of the long wooden-panelled hall. "Jimmy," I whispered. The door was ajar. I pushed into it and forced it open. I had found her. I had found the ghost. Ashy white, but not translucent like I had imagined. She had my Jimmy under her arm. She was feeding the dog something off the kitchen benches. "Give me back my cat," I whispered. Her head turned quickly to me. I had given her a fright. I had given the ghost a fright. "Oh, miss, I'm so sorry." She made a move towards me, and I took several steps back. "Give me my cat. Put him on the floor," I said firmly. She put Jimmy on the floor, and the fucking cat wandered off in the wrong direction. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "You need to go back where you came from." "I'm sorry, miss. It's only that I'm on instructions from the mistress to come gather any leftovers, in case they go foul." I grabbed hold of the doorframe. My heart rate was slowing. "You are not a spirit." "No, ma'am. I'm the kitchen maid." I nodded and let a long exhale escape my lips. "My apologies," I said, not looking at her. "You're very... white." "Scottish, my lady." I walked into the kitchen and picked up the rogue, spleeny, worst cat in the whole of Christendom. "Is this your dog too?" she asked, smiling as the little mutt jumped up and asked for pats. "We're here upon request of the Lord and Lady. We are investigating the ghost... demon situation," I explained in stunted speech. "The dog, she's meant to sniff out spirits." "Ah," she said gently. "I think she sniffed out dried meat." She gave a small piece of mutton to the unrelenting, drooling beast. "Do you know anything about the spirit?" I asked. "Does it not frighten you to come here?" She looked at me reluctantly, her freckles standing brightly against her pale skin. "The Lord and Lady lost their daughter around the same time as the ghost came calling, ma'am, if you know what I mean." "You don't think it's a ghost?" "It could be her ghost, I suppose, but it's a bit Catholic." I nodded. "If it is her spirit, she was a very gentle child. Used to run down here all the time and ask cook for sugared almonds. She wouldn't do anything harmful." "What happened to her?" Oh, it was horrible, miss. She continued filling up her Hessian sacks of leftover food from the cupboard. She tripped. Hit her head. In the drawing room? She nodded. I think she must have fallen over something, or perhaps she was playing, running around, dancing. Whatever she was doing, she hit her head on the hearth. The Lord found her in a pool of blood. 'Tis no wonder he's haunted, I muttered. Aye, I had to help clean up. She shook her head and took several moments to compose herself. I wouldn't take a step back in that drawing room. What was her name? Little Beatrice. He used to call her Bee. I swallowed. Surely this was the root of all this madness, a ghost of his mind's making. Do you know what name Beatrice referred to the Lord by? She frowned a little. I think she just called him Papa. Thank you for this, I said, scooping up the dog, holding each animal under either arm. Cat and dog eyed each other suspiciously. I'm sorry for thinking you were a ghost. She laughed. 'Tis all well, miss. I searched the next few rooms for paper and quill and found them. I locked the door and set the animals down. Jimmy jumped on top of the writing desk, not a fan of the dog. I was shaking, but no longer from fear, from some sort of anticipation, excitement almost. I shut my eyes, took a deep breath, and wrote the following. Papa. I stopped. I stared at Jimmy, who was staring at me. What would I want to say to my father if I was dead? I'd probably haunt the shit out of him and make sure he knew my death was definitely all his fault. That did not help. Christ save me. Resigning myself to the task at hand, resigning myself to this journey, I reached into the pockets of my skirts and retrieved the spell I had torn from the book. It was just like poetry, I reminded myself. I could handle a bit of poetry. Poetry was my thing. Lord, protect me from the potential evil within this poem, I began. I do this only to relieve a poor man of grief. I uncrumpled the spell. I conjure you, Beatrice B., daughter of Lord Sotheby, by the names of the angels and Sator and Azamor, that ye intend to me in this aeor, and send unto me a spirit that does fulfill my commanding and desire, and that can also understand my words for only the next minute or so that I may write a letter to your father in your name. I swallowed. Nothing happened. Nothing tangible. No ghostly apparition appeared. No noise reached me from the darkness. But I picked up my quill and wrote. I only wanted to tell you that I am safe. I am with God in heaven. Christ has a never-ending supply of sugared almonds. I will leave you in peace. B. I felt a warm shiver run up my back. I sat up straight in my chair. This was ungodly business. Or, I suppose, it was very godly business. Writing letters from the heavens. I was merely transcribing what the spirit wanted to say, I told myself. I had no idea if the spell had worked, or if I was just a dirty, rotten liar. The letter itself looked very corporeal, very of this realm, but it would have to do. Arming myself with the dog and cat, I marched back to the library. Where is he? I asked, faced with only the witches and Rufus and no lord at all. He's outside. The presence was too much. They were all seated, relaxed, not doing anything witchy at all. Do you have a solution? Asked Hildy. There was a something in her eye. It was less of a twinkle and more like a deviant glint. Well, your stupid dog isn't working, is it? We'll try holy water next, Hildy said, getting out a small bottle of clear liquid from an inside pocket. No. No holy water, not yet. I need to speak with him. They followed me outside. He was sitting not far from the home, his back against a tree, looking up into the branches, no doubt getting wet from the slight sprinkling of rain that had begun. It was a dark, miserable day. My lord? Is it done? He asked, his face desperate. I knelt down next to him. I saw his story now, swimming in his eyes. It is done, my lord. I saw him take an inhale of breath, and I wondered if he was almost sad to have his daughter leave his side. She left you this. I handed him the letter. My breath got clogged in my body. I watched, rigid, as he read my letter. My transcribed letter, I reminded myself. B, he said, after a long moment. He looked at me, eyes dry, only the slightest frown on his face. You found this? In the library, by the hearth, I managed. He nodded. She didn't know how to write, he said softly, not accusing, but a little confused nonetheless. God blesses many with gifts in heaven, said Zita firmly. He nodded, completely accepting. He needed this letter, and he had been given it. He wasn't about to throw it to the wind. There was a breeze. All of us turned into it. I felt each of our bodies move as we put our faces into the brisk autumn air. I took a deep inhale, then returned my gaze to the Lord. His body was unwinding, like a wrung cloth being hung out to dry, the creases unfolding. "We can return home," he whispered. "I am in a great debt to you. You set her free. She only wanted to tell you it wasn't your fault. She loves you. She didn't mean to frighten you." I spoke intuitively, without thinking. Again he nodded, a quiver of the lip this time. "I must pass on Bee's message to her mother." He stood. "God bless you, witches." He stopped and kissed my hand, then left towards the stables. There was a silence. The rain fell through the leaves and onto my face. "You are a witch," murmured Rufus. I looked to him. "I am nothing of the sort." "What will happen if he still feels the presence in his house?" Zita asked sternly, like I was in trouble. "Do you think he will?" I asked, turning to her. She looked at the big, dark home. "What did the letter say?" "Only that his daughter will leave him in peace." "What else did you say?" "How do you know there is something else?" "Because I know you are deviant." "I just wrote that Christ has an endless supply of sugared almonds." I shrugged. The witches looked at me for a long moment. "Yes, we are done here," she concluded. "This place has no haunting any more." We walked, in silence, back to our carriage.